this as a leadership lab. Try things, make mistakes, strengthen your skills, take pleasure in the journey is all important. And I agree with it and I try to follow it. And thank you. Thank you for listening to my story. I believe all our stories are important to us. One day I'll get a chance to listen to your story. This as a leadership and lab. Thanks to those try things, really helped me, my family, my sisters, my friends, fantastic colleagues, mentors, mentees, line managers, University of Exeter Medical School, my senior colleagues, and my students.
Thank you very much, Brinda. We really enjoyed and it was really great. I mean, presentation, sharing your experience. It was really good. Thank you very much. So, do you have any questions? Is there any questions? Yes, please, Vibit.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Like, I have a lot of questions. I mean, it's very interesting. Because this is like my first experience to know a lot of things about leadership, about gender and inequality. So my question is, because yeah, it's only I don't know about this sector. Like maybe unconsciously we have how to say, like, include like maybe gender sensitivity or something else, inequality, but it is not stated explicitly, like in our paper or in our research. Like, how did you maybe you have like a suggestion for me, like how do I can start, or how can I start this, how to say, like this kind of things, like, to be explicit in my research paper or my research and something else like this. Thank you so much.
Now, I think the best way to start is start talking about this in your group, in your research group, in your department. Look at kind of data that you have at the institution level, challenges women face in academia. Maybe have a journal club where these kind of papers can be discussed, and how other institutions, the institutions outside Indonesia, might have addressed it. And maybe think about kind of for example, we have Athena Swan Charter, which specifically looks at kind of gender equality. Discuss about Athena Swan and what it has done to UK University as a model, and maybe from there you can start it. And again, it's showing that we have achieved that kind of gender equality is important as part of Athena Swan, because then only it is linked to research grants and the institutional reputation. So those kind of things may be the best way to do it, because it has to be brought into the system. I'm sure Martino and Marty can send you information about Athena Swan Charter. See how that as a case study, you can discuss it in your thing. It relates to research. It relates to educational provision. It relates to the representation of women in research and education. So that would be maybe a best way to start.
Thank you. Can I have one more question, Mehdi?
Yeah.
Okay. Like, because
we have Leal waiting. Sorry, Leal.
Yeah. Maybe this is very short. Like, you know, you have research about review about the curriculum, how to include like all these things in the curriculum. So what did you find? I mean, I never like, pay attention on kind of this thing.
Yeah. So no, the curriculum review with respect to racial and social justice is an important aspect for us. What we saw in our medicine curriculum is there is some good representation, because diversity has been promoted for a very long time in our professional, the structure that looks after our medicine program, which is GMC, because theme there, and we have seen that being represented in many aspects of our curriculum. But still, there are some challenges. For example, at the moment, the one area that we really don't understand much is about how that kind of colonial legacy or the historical perspectives have brought these kind of inequalities that we see in patient care. So that we really need to work on. And there are other areas where we have to make sure that our patients where we can see that the awareness of diversity is increasing, but it hasn't to the same proportion. It has not been increased in healthcare settings. So we have to bring that up to make sure we are providing that patient care. Now, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. So moving to Professor Layal Hakim, she's once again I'm going to introduce her because she joined us a little bit late. So she's Director of Education and Student Experience from Department of Mathematics and Statistics. Thank you, Layal, for joining us and accepting our invite.
Hi, Maddy, and hi, everyone. Thanks very much for having me and inviting me to be part of this event. Brenda, I really enjoyed your presentation. Sorry, I missed the first part, but I found it very inspirational myself. And it's something very, it can be a bit emotional sometimes because a lot of us struggle with different kinds of challenges and obstacles for our career and during our career. And sometimes it's kind of difficult to articulate to those who may not understand such struggles, the challenges that those have brought. So I found that presentation really inspirational. I'm going to share my slides, just have a brief set of slides. Yeah, so I guess you can see my slides.
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Oh, brilliant. So this is going to be talking about my journey into and in academia. So I'll also be speaking about where I am now and the experiences and thought processes as to how it got me to where I am. So yeah, my name is Layal Hakim and I'm in the Department of Mathematics and Statistics at the University of Exeter, and I've been here since 2018. I'm going to speak a little bit about why I am where I am now and the different challenges that I faced. So what I've put here in the beginning of the timeline is from 1999 to 2000. So that's 1 year. And then from 2002 to 2004, another 2 years, I wasn't living in the UK. So I was born in the UK. I was raised in London. And then in 1999, so when I was 9, 10, I went to Lebanon, my home country where my parents are from. And I lived in Lebanon for 1 year. So I did what would have been year 6 here in the UK. I did that in Lebanon. And then 2 years after, we came back to London. And then in 2002, when I was 13, we went back to Lebanon and we lived there again for another 2 years. And so I found those 3 consecutive years and the years in between those kind of caused a little bit of turbulence because I was, just becoming a teenager and I was experiencing different schools and educational systems, so moving houses. So I come from a large family. I'm one of 8 kids. And I know that might be somewhat kind of common in some countries or at sometimes, but even in London in the 90s, that was quite considered like a big family. And so moving houses and countries was quite a busy time, especially for my parents. And the main reason why we decided to come back in 2004 to London is because my eldest brother has cerebral palsy, and my youngest brother, who was diagnosed at a young age, he was still a toddler, he was diagnosed with autism. And when we were living in my parents felt that the schooling system in Lebanon wasn't suitable for those with disabilities, and the kind of help and support that they had access to here in London was different and much better than what they would have got in Lebanon at that time. I'm sure things are different now because even in developing countries, they are trying to facilitate and support disabled kids and students in general. But that was the main reason why we decided to come back. And I think I guess the main reason why my parents wanted us to go in the first place was so that we can kind of get connected and reconnected with our culture and learn roots. So it's kind of I was young and we didn't have much choice. We just kind of followed wherever our parents would take us. But I found that a fundamental part for the start of my career because when I was young, I was very into kind of arts and performing arts and drama and English literature. And it was only the 2 years that I studied in Lebanon between 2002 and 2004 that I started to like maths and science. I went to a school in Lebanon, and I was very much inspired by my maths and science teachers there, and they kind of bring the math. And so when I came back to London in 2004, some of my old teachers at my school, when they heard that Leia was doing maths at A-level, they were very surprised. They said to my old friends, "Are you sure we're talking about the same Leia Hakim?" So it was kind of very shocking to them, because I grew up in love with novels and English literature and classical literature, English literature, Russian literature. That was kind of my childhood. And so it was very shocking for them to hear that I've moved to mathematics, which was a whole different world. And I would say the main thing that made me go into maths and like maths and understand maths from a different perspective and a different way of thinking about it was the schooling that I got in Lebanon. I found it challenging moving back and forth and going from a city like London to a city like Beirut. I found it challenging to adapt and readapt, and traveling, with a large family and 30 suitcases. It was something that I don't forget. In this timeline, I've also included these square brackets, which indicate what I would say were challenging parts, maybe challenging parts, but seeing as a stepping stone to overcome an obstacle that I was going through. A journey, when we talk about our academic journey to somebody, or on our CV, for example, we don't really talk about the moments that we kind of went down or hit rock bottom. So I think it's important, because it gives a better picture, a clearer picture of what we went through. And so that's what these square gaps are about. And it's an important and a big part of our journey in terms of how it made us. And I like what Vrinda spoke about in terms of development and growth, and having that growth mindset, because it makes us who we are. And for me, those square bracket gaps did lead me to the next step. It was a part that took me to where I am now. So in 2007, I started my degree. I did a maths degree at Brunel University, which is in Northwest London. It was a 3-year bachelor's degree. I then graduated and did a PhD in the same department. I would say maybe the main challenge that I had when I was younger was I came from a very traditional family, and my parents were they were quite strict and scared for their kids to go to uni. And I think it was partly because my parents, when they came here in the 80s, having fled a civil war, that this country was new, didn't know anything about the outside world. And so it was easy for them to kind of say no to anything that we wanted to do. And so me and my older sisters, it was a struggle for us to actually get into uni. Not because of our grades, we did very well at A-level, but it was a hurdle for us to convince our parents that we can go to uni and we're going to be fine. Nothing's going to happen to us outside the home. And it's these little things that, some of us might be reluctant to speak about, especially to those who might be from privileged backgrounds where they don't understand this. What do you mean your parents didn't want you to go to uni? They might not kind of fathom or comprehend what that means. But I think for some of us that might come from traditional families, this might be very overprotective or worried about the culture of the country that we're living in. It's some of the challenges that some of young kids go through. And so I went to Brunel eventually. I was really happy. I got into much better universities, but I was happy that I was just, allowed to go to the closest university to our home. And so that's one of the struggles that I went through, to kind of convince my parents that yes, I am going to go to uni and I'm going to be fine, and don't worry about me. It was a very difficult summer, but it was a big part of me getting into uni. Once I had that step, things became much easier, and I did my PhD in the same department university in mathematics. I started in September 2010. It was a 3.5 year course. It was a PhD. and it was related to my final year project. So my supervisor, Professor Sergei Mikhailov, was the same supervisor that I had during my final year project when I did my BSc. Towards the end of my PhD, I got engaged, I got married, I was in London. I started applying for postdocs and other academic positions. My PhD years shaped my values because I felt like during those years I was doing a lot of teaching, and I realized that I love teaching mathematics to university students, and I started to realize differences in the mathematical mindsets of undergraduate students, particularly those coming from different backgrounds. And I started to become very much interested in that and interested in maths pedagogy in general. And so in 2014, in July, I started a postdoc at Imperial College London. And it was for 3 years. Well, it was 1 year contract, and then I moved to another department at Imperial College. I started my postdoc at the computer science department, and it was for 15 months. And then I moved to the maths department at Imperial College and did another postdoc in that department. And during those 3 years that I was at Imperial, 2 babies. So I went through 2 pregnancies, and I had 2 little boys. And that also, I mean, it's kind of like it's beautiful, and you know, it's a great thing that happened. It did create a little bit of turbulence in terms of returning to my hours of emails that it was just for my kids at that time. So it was kind of like a different kind of working that I was doing when I had kids and babies compared to when I was, for example, a PhD student. My position at Exeter, I moved to Exeter in April 2018. It was me just after my second maternity leave. I started an education and scholarship lectureship position, which is in the UK, we have 2 types of academic routes. We have education and research, and then we have education and scholarship, where the education and scholarship, it's seen that you're involved in teaching and education scholarship rather than research. So I went down that kind of education only route, and that's the route that I still have now. And I've been at Exeter since then, and I've had various roles that I'll speak about in a minute during my time here at Exeter. But one of the things that shaped my career and where I am now is the leadership I've taken in the last few years during my time here at Exeter. And the reason why it was very fundamental for me is because during these leadership roles, I learned a lot about professionalism, about communication, about understanding and dealing with different situations and the strategic initiatives of the university and of the department in education. And so I felt that it just kind of further expanded my interests and values in maths education at higher education. So when I was an undergraduate student, I was helping a lot of students in mathematics. So we went through a phase where we would meet in the library and start helping each other with maths. And that's when I realized that I really love teaching, that I love teaching maths. And that was kind of one of the highlights of my education, that realizing that I love teaching maths and that others are understanding from my teaching as well. So the PhD that I did was kind of sitting between maths and engineering. So we were looking at engineering problems, but from a mathematical point. And the title of the project was Numerical Analysis of a Cohesive Zone Model Approach for Time and History Dependent Materials. And what I did in that project, I looked at crack growth in specific types of materials. We focused on polymers, and we studied the mathematical modeling and solution that helps us understand when a crack appears in that material and when does it propagate, and when does that propagation lead to the fracture and breaking of that material. And I was very interested when do much engineering courses during my undergraduate degree in maths, and this project kind of enabled me to learn more about something that I was interested in, but I didn't know that during my degree. And while I was a PhD student, I also went to some conferences on that interface between maths and engineering, and I networked with other academic staff within the university and outside the university about that as well. So I really enjoyed doing that PhD. So I deliberately I had a couple of slides of the mathematical formulation and solution, but then I thought maybe it's not to show here. But interested, I can certainly go through it at some point if you want. So when I was at Brunel University, I won a few awards, and the teaching awards were really those that helped me see that teaching maths and knowing how to teach maths, it's kind of it's not something simple. It's not something that everybody can do. And I remember when I was collecting one of my awards, somebody in the audience afterwards came to me, and she said to me, "It's really nice to see a woman winning such an award, because in recent years it's always been like a male." And when I heard her say that, it kind of woke me up, because I didn't know at that point. So this was a few years ago, maybe 10 years ago, actually. It made me wake up to the fact that we have a problem. We have a gap. We have a gender gap, and this gender gap could shape or break somebody's career. And it's something difficult that many women in STEM face, and also those from other groups less represented in STEM face, in terms of not having that support and recognition or in what they're doing compared to others. And things like this recognition and empowerment that actually enables them to go further in their career. So at that point, it got me thinking that, oh, we have a gap, and what do we do to kind of help those that are from minority groups? During my time at Imperial College, so I did a postdoc about something that was completely different to understanding crack growth in the materials. It was about high performance computing. So they were looking for a mathematician. But I noticed during those 15 months that it's not really something that I was really interested in. And after 15 months, I decided to move to the maths department, and I was lucky that they actually took me there to the maths department. And some of the work that I started doing while I was doing my postdoc in the maths department, I'm still working on now. So we always have unfinished research, unfinished projects that we're always forever working on. But during my time at Imperial College, while I was at the computer science department and the maths department, I was also a graduate teaching assistant. I was still involved in teaching small classes, large classes. And although as a postdoc research associate, we weren't expected to as part of our role, as part of our postdoc role, it's something that I always jumped to do. For me, it was something that kind of helped me keep going. My performance and how productive I was in my research was helped by doing some teaching on the side, because it kind of charged my battery, really, because for me, teaching mathematics, it was something that I was always interested in. And one thing that used to strike me when teaching undergraduate students, and still does now, is the different ways and different paces of learning. When we show students a theorem and we'd like to prove it, or we'd like them to come up with a proof, I really like to see how they think, what kind of mathematical thinking they in their mind in order to reach a method and then to reach a solution. And one thing that really interests me when it comes to teaching mathematics in higher education is the feelings, all the different feelings that come with doing maths. So what I mean by that is when somebody sees a mathematical problem and okay, I haven't seen this before. I'm not sure what to do. I'm starting to feel confused. Maybe I can do this. Maybe I can do that. I'm starting to feel curious. I've gotten somewhere. I remembered a formula. So now I feel a little bit satisfied, but this is the wrong formula. Satisfied. So with mathematics, because of all the requirement of logic and rational thinking, sequential thinking, all the different types of thinking that mathematics requires, it brings with it a lot of different feelings. And so I think that kind of molds our thinking as to how we learn and how we learn independently when it comes to those kind of subjects. I'm sure a lot of that's also related to other STEM subjects too, and not just mathematics, because mathematical thinking is not about solving a mathematical problem. Even as toddlers do mathematical thinking, because it goes through those 4 stages of generalizing and then proving. So we do a lot of outside mathematics. So during my first few years here at Exeter, I was approached by the head of department, and he said to me, I can see that you're still doing some research in mathematics in the applied mathematics field that was related to my PhD, and I can see that you're still publishing. Would you be interested in going onto an education and research route? And so he kind of presented the idea of me moving from an education only track in academia to an education and research. And so I was thinking about it, and there was a few months of what's going to happen with my contract. Going to be education and research? Am I going to stay as education only? So there was a lot of talks about that, and it got me thinking about what do I want to do, and what is my career going to look like in the next coming years. And so I spoke to some people, and I also had some mentors who really helped me and guided me and advised me about academia and where I find myself and the values that I have in academia. And I felt that although it's tempting to go down an education and research track at a great university like Exeter, I actually felt that I prefer to stay on the education and scholarship route of teaching and developing educational resources and leading educational projects and leading the education in the department is something that I really anticipated doing more of. And so I said to our head of department back then, thank you, but actually I'd like to stay in the education and scholarship track, and I'd like to do more with it. I felt like I had a lot of ambitions, and I had like a to-do list of things that the department should do to better educate our students. I did a lot of training during my time here, and which were run at the University of Exeter. Some of them were about the bigger picture in university, and some of them were education related. So, for example, I've listed some here, the Inclusive and Transformative Leadership Program that I did in August 2021. And it was a 3-day online program. I found that really useful. It was also a place to meet others in the university, academic staff and otherwise, who are very passionate about inclusive and transformative leadership. And it was that time that I knew that I was about to become the director of education. And so I thought it's important to look at the leadership from different perspectives. What does it mean to be a leader? And the different branches that come out of that. And one of the branches that come out of good leadership is understanding what it means to be inclusive to those that you're working with and to the things that you're working with as well. So the projects that you're dealing with, what does it mean to have accessible lecture notes? What does it mean to communicate in an inclusive way? So all of those are what shapes somebody to be a good leader. And I thought it's something very important, especially if I was to take the director of education role. I also did the Aurora program, which is also part of Advanced HE. and a Leadership Development for Women program. The COIU was happening before COVID, but they had more courses on COIU during COVID. And it was a place where academic staff globally, on a global level, they would meet in this online course called the COIU to talk about the global classroom, they called it. So to talk about different educational approaches in different countries and the different ways that the different countries are using virtual learning environment. How are they using interaction between staff and student? What kind of response word do they use? So it's kind of, it was a place to share ideas about on the COIU session that I went to was specifically about online education because we were during COVID at that time, we were during lockdown. We also had some courses at Exeter when I first came here, which is something that everybody has to do, which used to be called PCAP, but it's basically a place to kind of inform and train staff on teaching in higher education. And I did a similar course at Imperial when I was a postdoc. So I did a lot of education projects, and I'll speak briefly about them here. And if anybody's interested to hear in depth, please do contact me or maybe ask at the end during the Q&A session. The first educational project that I did at the University of Exeter was called Continuing Student Development. So one thing that I did when I was a postdoc at Imperial is I created this project that showed students why it is that students lose marks in exams. When students come from school, they don't just learn more difficult things, but they also transition to a whole different new world. And part of that new world is a different way of being examined compared to how they were being examined at school. And doing that project at Imperial on understanding assessment design, and this project was tailored for students, I noticed that the way they're learning and the way they are revising is majorly impacted by what their exam is going to look like or their expectations from the exam. And sometimes when that's molding the way they learn, they don't realize that they're missing out some fundamental parts of that learning. As for many students, learning for them, they feel like it's because I need to demonstrate my understanding at an exam and not because they really enjoy learning more about that thing. Sometimes the perception needs to change a bit so that enjoyment in learning is more important for them than just what they're going to get at the exam. So continuous student development was aimed at helping students keep on track with the content through online quizzes, and the online quizzes were designed on an online platform called Numbers, which is used by many universities here in the UK, especially for mathematics quizzes. And they were supposed to be regular fun quizzes where students kind of can navigate through the questions that they want to do and the topics that they want to be boosted on. We then aligned those weeks with a maths cafe, targeting the topics that students didn't do very well in these online quizzes. So because it was online, we were able to kind of measure and see, it looks like students need help with linear algebra, or it looks like students need help with this. And so we would target help at those maths cafes, depending on what kind of topics students needed help on. There was a project on mobile learning where I created like an online framework architecture that shows what a mobile learning app could look like for a mathematics student at higher education, where we had things, flashcards, mobile versions of those online quizzes, mobile versions of different definitions and theorems they need to learn that come from lecture notes. So it was kind of like a spider diagram that students can navigate between and engage with parts that help them aid in their learning. And I find that useful, especially for the educator, to see what is it that students are clicking on this app. What is it they find engaging, and what is it they feel would bridge their gaps in knowledge? And so we did that, and the project was then followed on a year after that mobile learning project, where we recruited an intern to start working on the app to see what it looks like. So it was a very short project, so it never really had like a finished product where we're actually using this mobile learning app and disseminating it to students. But maybe it's something that can be picked up on later on. But we did do surveys and studies in terms of how students would feel about having such a mobile learning app in learning mathematics. I was also part of a project called Mathematics Without Tears and Fears, which was in collaboration with 2 other members of staff in economics department, so they weren't in mathematics. And we recruited 8 student interns to create pedagogical games in mathematics. So we looked at one of the topics in maths that undergraduate students usually find difficult, which is constructing proofs, understanding proofs by contradiction or induction, the different kinds of mathematical proofs. Many students find it difficult, mainly because they haven't done much of it at A level, at school level. And with mathematics, it's one of those things that you need repetition for you to start to like it, and for you to find it like a part of just second nature, doing it as second nature. And so with Mathematics Without Tears or Fears, the idea was to create a game where there's a starting point to the game, there's an end point, and students try to navigate through the game. So one of the games we looked at is having a train track, and we're trying to navigate a train from point A to point B with the obstacles in between, and navigating that train in a way to minimize the obstacles that it has to go through in order to get to B. And the way you do that uses proof by contradiction. So with proof by contradiction, you assume that something's not true, and then it leads to a wrong conclusion. And so because it led you to a wrong conclusion, you say that the assumption that I made at the start was not true. And so it kind of, the game is supposed to force a student to wrong assumption and show them that wrong assumption is going to lead you to the wrong conclusion. So trying to bring some more fun into learning a new concept, a new mathematical concept. Some of the educational projects that I was involved in were also to do with inclusivity and accessibility in education. One of the projects was called the Exeter Spectrum program, and it was in collaboration with Professor Barry Cooper and aimed at supporting autistic students at higher education level. And the main motivation for me in terms of doing that project was noticing a difference between what schools do to support autistic students do. And that realization came to me first when I started my undergraduate degree. I remember there was somebody in my class who was autistic, and I felt like he was being ignored a lot. I felt like the challenges that he was going through and the difficulties that he was going through were being ignored a lot. And having chats with him, I noticed that the level of support that he got at school was not comparable to what he was getting at university, and it was a national problem. So this was more than 10 years ago, but now it's still a problem. But I feel like now universities are more aware of it, and increasing that awareness of autism, support autistic students is, I feel, is something that's much more common now compared to before. And as part of the Exeter Spectrum program, we had focus groups. So we spoke to students who were diagnosed with autism, or even those that are autistic but don't have a diagnosis yet. And we also had a group of so-called autism champions, which there was 30 autism champions, and they came from different departments and different campuses as well. And they were academic staff and professional services staff. And we would meet on a monthly basis and talk about any ideas on how to support autistic students, all the way from designing our resources to tutorials, personal tutorials as well, and helping students transition from school to university, and helping autistic students to navigate through the different structures and services within the university as well. There's a lot of help and support systems available to them, but because, you know, as not just Exeter, but many universities, because it's such a big world, it's sometimes difficult to kind of navigate or to know who you need to go to for help. And sometimes when something is very overwhelming and energy consuming, they tend to disconnect with that form of help. And so we were discussing, what can we do so that we're helping students connect services more and structures more, rather than to disconnect from them. And so it was a project it was a 12-month project, but then it got extended for another year or two. And I do regularly get emails from the previous autism champions in terms of, you know, reforming this group and giving a talk at so this week we have the Neurodiversity Celebration Week. We had a conference on Tuesday. Well, there was a few days, but I had a talk on Tuesday about that project, where we spoke in detail exactly the different tips and advice about supporting autistic students. And importantly, all of these projects and other projects that take place at this universities, it's important that the outputs kind of get disseminated further beyond the university and beyond the UK as well. I think it's really important that other countries benefit from the outputs of the work that's taking place, especially because one thing that we tend to do in education and in everything in general is we pilot something, we launch it, and then we evaluate it. So that's what we do in education. We evaluate something. How do we measure and ensure that what this thing was aimed to do, the objective of this thing, is being met? And once that evaluation is done and we can see where it has helped and where it can be improved, that is the part, disseminating it further to different countries. I feel like I know I mentioned this in one of the meetings that we had, Brenda, the global classroom meetings that we had, about the importance of the responsibility that we have. The way that's the word that I like to use. I feel like not just the UK, but other developed countries, the responsibility that we have to help other countries when it comes to improving the design and delivery of courses. And having said that, it's also two ways. I feel like many developing countries, they have excellent techniques of pedagogy or support that we could also benefit from. And I feel like many developing countries don't have that kind of agency and platform and means to share some of the wonderful work that they're doing. So I just thought I'd mention that. And so that was the Exeter Spectrum program. And another one is the Encompass Decolonizing STEM, which was a very short project, actually, in collaboration with Dr. John Brune. And it took place a couple of summers ago. And the idea about that was to explore the various ways of decolonizing STEM. And for mathematics and other science subjects in general, that doesn't just mean looking at the historical exploration or those that were forgotten in mathematics thousands and millennia before the Romans or the Greeks or the Italians did it. There's a lot of like famous Indian mathematicians or African mathematicians or Arab, Persian mathematicians that were kind of gone unnoticed because they didn't have those means to disseminate their work, or it could also be for political reasons as to why a lot of their work didn't get valued and used until after hundreds or thousands of years ago, that you know, mathematicians in other countries, there's the analysis era, we call it in mathematics the analysis era, where a group of Italian, the famous Cauchy, Riemann, they came up with a lot of famous advances in mathematics that are still being used today, fundamental to the mathematics that we do today. And much of that, when you look at exploring decolonizing STEM, much of that was explored thousands of years before that. And but this project wasn't just about the historical explorations of mathematics and STEM subjects, but also about enabling voices of those less represented, and so be it gender or race or sexuality, or so kind of empowering those that are currently less represented in the, and how do we help them with enabling those voices. So some of the leadership roles that I took. So during my first year here at Exeter as an educational scholarship lecturer, many people in the department said, based on the ideas that I had, for example, at our program meetings, I was in my very first year, I would look for education things and I would be involved, and I would make my voice clear. I would say my opinion about things, and I would say, oh, we have a problem here, we have a gap here. And they say to me that the things that you're saying at these program meetings, we feel like you should be the stage coordinator. And so from 2019, I became the stage 1 coordinator, and I started making changes to how we lead and build community for students in our stage 1. And the year after that, I then became the stage 1 and stage 2 coordinator in the maths department. And during that year, I was also the mathematics digital lead that we had. There was like a digital lead role in every department because we were using a blended learning approach because of COVID. And I was also, during that time and the year after that, and still now, the transition and induction coordinator. Previously, we were part of a college called SEMS, but I'm still the transition and induction coordinator now. And the transition and induction working group, which is in university level, is that these leads meet regularly to talk about how we can help students transition from school to university, and what kind of resources and induction activities do we need to do to help them in that transition. And then the Director of Education and Student Experience role that I started in last year, so in 2022. So this is my second year doing that role. And one thing that I felt during these leadership roles is how much I'm learning about leadership in higher education. And I do a lot of observing, so people like Vrinda and Nikki, and see how they deal with and how they take on and tackle different kind of strategic initiatives that the university has and things. And I find that observing and the mentoring that I get is a big part that shapes and molds how I perform my own leadership role. And having said that, I also see things and I say, oh, actually, I would have done that differently, or I would have done this like that. And I noticed that the impact that we have in terms of how we lead something on other academic staff causes them to change how they see something as well. And so, for example, there's a lot of examples to say about that, but maybe one example would be selling a solution to academic staff. So one thing that I noticed in mathematics, and surely in other subjects as well, there will inevitably be members of staff that like to continue doing the same thing that they've been doing for the past 30 years. It could be that they like to stick to their traditional approaches in education or student support. And we have problems in, be it in the maths department or any other problem, you know, when it comes to student progression, student retention, transition, you know, there are many areas that we can improve on. And when you want to impose a different approach to something because you feel that it would solve a problem, a lot of academic staff, in maths at least, I've seen, are driven by data. They're driven by their kind of willingness to try on a new approach is driven by data and driven by showing them how and why this approach is going to be the solution to your problem. And so I felt like in the leadership role, I've learned a lot about communicating with other staff, and I feel like I've gotten to that place where many staff come to me for not only advice of how to run something or how to deal with something, but also what approach they can take to solve a problem, be it in their module or on a stage. And I feel very proud of myself that I've reached that stage, because I feel like getting to somewhere where other people in the department, even those that have been here for many, many more years than me, feel like they can come to me and ask me for advice about something. I feel like it's something that's not very common, and so I feel very kind of proud of myself that I've reached that. There were other forms of engagement that I felt like as an educational and scholarship member of staff I was able to engage in and to be involved in, such as conferences in higher education, education in higher education, and conferences in mathematics. So we have some national bodies here in the UK, the Mathematical Society, the Institute of Mathematics and its applications, a place for staff or students in mathematics to get together and learn more about higher education mathematics and how we can shape higher education mathematics as well. And so I've tried to stay engaged with those national bodies. I'm also one of the CWDM members, which is the Committee for Women and Diversity in Mathematics, which is run by the London Mathematical Society. And I feel like by being directly involved in such committees, I can have an impact, and also it would be a place for me to kind of learn more about what happens in those societies. I was also involved in writing educational articles and pieces of advice for Times Higher Education, and I was also shortlisted for global education related awards and presented my work at those conferences as well. There are other things that I'm doing for that CPD, for continuing professional development. And so one of the things that I'm involved in is I'm currently at Aspire Higher Education Academy mentor and an application assessor as well. And I feel like by assessing, for example, senior fellowship applications, so this is something that we have in the UK where we have like associate fellowship and then fellowship and then senior fellowship and then it's usually targeted for academic staff, although I'm also aware that some college lecturers can also be on that as well. But I find it a way to help me learn more about what I can do differently as well. When some of the assessments that I see, I see some nice ideas and think, oh, that would be actually good for the mathematics department. And so it's kind of one of the ways that I find can help me develop in my career as an education and scholarship member of staff. I'm also trying to look out at ways that I can be connected with supporting the inclusivity and diversity in mathematics. So one thing that motivated me while I was picking my A-levels, picking my university course, I noticed that when somebody would ask me, oh, what do you do? What do you study? And then I say mathematics. They say, oh, wow, you know, there's like this immediate shock, almost as if a woman or a woman in an ethnic minority is not supposed to do mathematics. Like they find it a bit of a unusual. And even still till now, and I noticed that shock, that, you know, kind of, you know, initial shock, I get it more from those from my background compared to those, let's say, you know, that are not. And it's not that they are disappointed, it's just kind of, it's almost like pleased to hear it. And it's nice, but it also goes to show that in some places there's still that stereotype that, you know, if you do this or if you look like that, then, you know, math isn't for you, this thing is for you instead. And so I think it's really important that we break those stereotypes and break those expectations as to what different social constructs and different people think or expect us to do. And it's really important, especially as one thing that I value and champion is helping students identify what they like to do and enabling them to do that thing that they enjoy doing. And I think it's very important for our students to remember continuously regardless of who you are or where you're from or how you were brought up or the voices that you heard while you were being brought up, regardless of all of that, essentially at the end of the day, you're just going to do what you enjoy doing, and what that thing is going to get you to what you want to be in the future. Because it's other people's voices and expectations and stereotypes, it could be very damaging. It could kind of lead somebody on a route that they actually don't want to be on. And so even, you know, even while I was growing up, there were many kind of background noises. When you finish school, you know, as a woman, that's it, you just get married and then you just stay at home. There was kind of the expectation that that's the default. They're like, Layal, this is the default route for you. You know, you can go to uni if, you know, if you have to, but eventually after you graduate, your your end point is basically just staying at home as a wife and, you know, raising a family. There was a lot of that while I was growing up. And that's not necessarily true in all Arab families. So I'm from an Arab family, but I think it just depends on those that are more kind of modern or living in the modern world compared to those that are kind of more or less conservative. And so I kind of came from a background and family where there was a lot of that noise in the background of, okay, you can do your A-levels, but so what I got and how I performed and the excellent grades that I got and finishing first in my whole class at university, mathematics, all of that for them was, you know, it wasn't important. It was, that's it. Oh, you finished now. Okay, now you can get married and just stay at home. Like, you know, they just had like expectations because of me being a woman. And I feel like it's very important for students and everyone in general to remember that you can do whatever you want to do, and that there's no such thing as being normal. There's no such thing as normal. There's no such thing as conventional. There's no such thing as what it means to be conventional. And in a university setting especially, it's important for staff and students to remember that there's no such thing as conventional and there's no such thing as expectations, and that everybody's route would look differently. And it kind of empowers and helps with that development and growth as well. And I think it's fundamental, and we have to talk about it, because for a lot of people, their future and their career is being shaped by other people's expectations and other people's kind of enforcing them to live differently. And I feel like it's something important that we need to speak about. So yeah, there were a few other things that I was involved at, and I'm continuing places and ways that I can further expand my career. But right now, I'm very busy and happy in my director of education role, and there's a lot of things that I feel like we can improve in the education in the department, and it's something that I very much enjoy doing. So that's it. And I see I've spoken a lot, but I'll stop sharing my screen now and welcome any questions.
Thank you, Leia. It was really interesting. I mean, hearing you and having your experience. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maddie.
Is there any question? Yes, please.
Yeah, if there's no one to ask you, maybe I will give a question for you, Dr. Layal. So, you are in education and students experience. Is it in under education faculty?
It's in the maths department, so it's in the faculty.
Oh, in maths department.
Yeah, in the mathematics.
Okay. So, is it like pure math or not math education, right?
Exactly. It's not maths
Oh.
education. It's not the education department. It's in mathematics, where we have pure maths and applied maths courses.
Okay, so did you teach or did you like apply program leadership for the student in your department?
Yes, so the role entails various things. So we look at the curriculum overall on our program, our undergraduate programs, our postgraduate programs. We also look at the different options that students can take with us. So for example, we have students taking a year in industry or a placement during the summer, and we offer all of these different programs and courses for them to not only get a degree, but also help them transition to the real world when they finish their degree. So a university is a place for them to not just kind of, you know, have that certificate, but also teaching them on what's the next step. And I feel like the university is the perfect place to, when students come to us, you know, they're 18, 19, 20, 21, we have some mature students. but the majority of the undergraduate body is between like 18 and 24 years old, for example. And during that stage, they're also transitioning into adulthood. And so they're going through a lot of things that they didn't go through in school. They start, living on their own. They're starting doing things on their own, like cooking, cleaning, whatever. And they're also making decisions for the first time, making their own decisions for the first time for many of them. And so I feel like as academic staff, we're also kind of responsible to help students transitioning to that essential part of their life. And as director of education, we kind of have like support systems to help students identify. We have community building events. We have support sessions in mathematics to help them with the things that they're stuck on during their degree.
So did you mean like you have like a certain subject about leadership in your department?
So we do various things. So for example, we do the teaching allocations, who's going to teach which modules. We talk about the assessment design, the assessment split in our modules. We talk about student support, how we can offer personal tutoring support for students, postgraduate students as well. So there's a lot of things that we kind of oversee and handle in the education.
Oh yeah, that's very great because it's very rare happen in in our university that that the lecturers care about this leadership thing during the math things have how to say like process learning process, right? So yeah, thank you for your explanations.
Oh, not at all. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Any question? Yeah.
Yes, yeah, because what I've seen here, for example, I taught a couple of courses in the computer science department, and I know an obvious thing that I noticed in the undergraduate student body is there's more males in computer science than mathematics, and I think there's this kind of thinking that, oh, programming or coding is for is for boys rather than girls, and a lot of in A level a lot of girls get put off from coding because of that perception that it's not for them. But in terms of what I've seen in maths, there's no correlation that males are better at coding than females. There's no correlation. Females are just as good at coding. That's what I've seen in mathematics. Maybe it's different in computer science or engineering, but from what I've seen and the kind of support that I give to students, I haven't seen anything that shows that males are better at coding than females. Yeah. Yeah, I think like the schools and engagement prior to university has a big kind of responsibility to help bridge that gender gap, because that kind of inclination to not go into coding, or the feeling that coding isn't for females, I think it comes from like a young age rather than at the university. Thank you, Awanda.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Is there any other questions? We are running late a little bit, 6 minutes actually. If there's no questions, so we can end the session. Thank you very much, everyone.
Not particularly a question, but maybe just an impression. I was so impressed with your presentation because, as we know, sometimes leadership and women is used to be perceived as incompatible. Yeah.
Oh, you're muted, Eka.
Sorry, not particularly a question, but more like an impression. So
Yeah.
thank you very much for that very interesting presentation, and also to put it in particular context of culture and particular context of leadership and how to develop the career. So I think it was quite interesting, and we learned a lot today. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Eka.
Thank you.
Thank you, Martino and Maddie, for inviting me to be part of this.
Thank you for accepting.
I
We
mean, like
really
for
enjoyed.
allocating time,
Yes.
spending time in your busy schedule, especially now we are nearly end of the term. You
Yes,
know,
exactly. Busy time.
Busy time for us, nearly of the term. Thank you for allocating time to attend this session. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Have a good day.
Yeah. Thank you everybody for attending. Thank you again, and have a lovely iftar. I'm sure in
Yes.
Indonesia is already like fasting the break
iftar
now.
time. Yes.
Yeah, iftar time. Yeah.
Yes.
Jakarta is already iftar time, but in Aceh, it's not yet. Still
Oh,
in
really?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
I
Still
see.
another maybe 38 minutes something, or 30.
Okay. Okay. It's a good timing then. It's a good timing then.
Yes. Good timing.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
All right.
So very nice
Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good
you.
day and good evening
Bye-bye.
for you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.